for allowing me the opportunity for me to be able to share my thoughts and reflection on the nation of Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, viewers. So once again, we continue to talk to the servant of God as the man of God continued to urge the nation of Zimbabwe that all of this falls on the leadership of the church. So the nation of Zimbabwe, as the servant of God we talk, it does not need another prophetic word, but God is giving the servant of God wisdom. And for the last few weeks, the man of God has been talking about how the leadership within the nation of Zimbabwe, how it needs to rise up. So sir, what is God saying to you when we look at the state of Zimbabwe today?
Now, we want to look at this and really reflect in a very deep and sober way. In Proverbs 24, verse 3 and 4, Solomon, one of the wisest and wisest men in the world, had some profound words to offer, which are words of counsel and words of wisdom. This is a very powerful reflection on how we build things and how we build things. And he says, by wisdom, a house is built. By wisdom. Anyone who wants to build up something, they ought to have wisdom. And he says, by understanding, it is established. So you need wisdom that translates into understanding so that you are able to establish something meaningful. And then he says, by knowledge, its rooms are filled with rare things. Now, I can see that there's a lot of Zimbabweans and Zimbabwean leaders who are opinionated about many things. Some of the Zimbabweans have very great ideas, and some of the leaders are making very bold statements. And so forth and so forth. And you see those things in a nation. But ultimately, out of all that mirage of noise, whether it is religious noise or political noise, there is need for wisdom. And so what do I see, or what is God showing me about the nation of Zimbabwe? I think that the extent of division in the country is very troubling. And these are some of the residues of the colonial state. Because the colonial state, by its very nature, was divisive. And so it was divisive and very destructive in its attempt to undermine unity among the local population. And so they thrived on dividing the people. Historians called it the divide and rule method. In other words, their modus operandi is that of you divide and then you rule the people. And so Zimbabwe largely is sick from the hangover and the fever of colonialism. Whether you find it in the church or you look at it in the political sphere or the social sphere or villages or communities, largely you see something that's very systematic and endemic. the very thing that is systematic and endemic in that nation is division.
Division.
By and large, and Zimbabweans don't know they are illiterate and socially unable to appreciate one another to a large extent, and thus unite and unify on a common goal. The biggest matrix of what we see in the nation is the podium down syndrome. Criticize one another without end, but don't find a common need for a solution to what we are critical about. So number one, Zimbabwe must know the value of unity. Very, very important. The value of unity.
Yes.
And the cost of division. There has to be a balance between them understanding the value of unity and the cost of division. Now, in Psalm 133, the word of the Lord tells us that how good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity. It is like the oil that is poured on the head of Aaron, coming down to his garments, even to the hem of his garment. There the Lord bestows a blessing and even life forevermore. How does a nation attract God to itself? How does it do that? Because in the struggle for change, one has to appeal to God and appeal to God in the manner and form in which, not that we can convince God, but we can come to the side of God and operate at that level of where God is. And in order to do that, the nation must exorcise itself from the demon of division, mistrust, and competition, jealousy, and ultimately what I would, in a very generic and broad terms, call the demon of putting down syndrome. That has to be exercised. That has to be, Zimbabwean have to be delivered. To a large extent, when you visit, when you travel, or I have traveled to a number of countries and have had the privilege to interact with my fellow Zimbabweans, whether they are church leaders or they are just political actors, I find something very troubling. Zimbabweans have a story about each other. And endless, meaningless, rambling stories that do not build anything. And in the United Kingdom, I encountered a certain segment of the African community that is in the diaspora. It was the Kenyan community, for example. And I interacted with the Kenyan community and I saw what they call Arambe, which are their meetings where they drum support for one another. They are focused on a common good and try to pull each other out of the many very desperate and compelling situations. I was challenged by one Asian man many, many years ago. He took me, this man, he took me and he showed me a story. And he says, you know, I come from Delhi, but when I came into the United Kingdom, I had a visa of 3 months and 2 £100. And when I came, I went to my Indian community. And these are people who don't believe the same God we believe in. That's the most heart-rending experience and situation. And he said they allowed me to get help from the community. So they galvanized themselves around this young Indian young man who had a dream. When he came into the United Kingdom, the dream to escape poverty in India, rebuild himself and go back home and contribute constructively to the development of his country. And by the time I meet him, he has spent so many years in the United Kingdom, and he owned the whole street of houses in the neighborhood where he was taking me. Literally, from the beginning of the street to the end, houses on both sides, this side on the left and the right, were owned by him. And so he sat down intimately and shared things with me. And those things really affected my